You can pick up your Friday the 13th figures at Big Bad Toy Store at the link in the description down below. Dragon Ball, Pokemon, Kaiju, and more. It's Steven's Toy Reviews. Hey there collectors, it's Steven here, and this is going to be the last video for my Halloween victory lap because unfortunately there were a couple of figures that I didn't get to for Halloween, and this is going to be one of them. Today we're going to be taking a look at the NECA Ultimate Jason Voorhees from the 2009 Friday the 13th remake. Now, I know a lot of folks aren't necessarily very fond of this movie, and myself included for the most part, but we do have to respect that this design of Jason is actually really cool, and in the movie there's a few nice throwbacks to the Friday the 13th series, which I think were pretty sweet. That being said, this isn't about the movie, it's about the figure. You might not like the movie, but you could potentially like this guy on the screen in front of you, yeah? Yeah, so enough jibber jabber, let's take a look to see whether or not this Jason is worth adding into your collection. Not gonna lie, I really do think this Jason design is huge and very intimidating. As a matter of fact, I would have to say the intro sequence to the 2009 remake is probably one of my favorite sequences in horror movies of all time. Jason just goes buck wild and just destroys those, well, they're not campers, but yeah, he just pretty much destroys everyone. And I do have to say NECA did a really fantastic job of capturing that intimidating Jason in action figure format. Recently, NECA has gone on a hot streak, if you will, for making figures that not only look good, but they actually have some great paint applications from the journey to prototype to final product, and this Jason is really no exception. And well, you know, it could look better, but to be honest, for about $28, this is looking great. Of course, the main issue I'm going to have to say here is going to be Jason's mask. I don't necessarily think it's painted up too well, and even if that's around the nose area isn't supposed to be painted just like the rest of the mask, the lack of really clean transition here is what bugs me the most. Except for one other detail. We do obviously have the default unmasked head for Jason, which is actually the one you put the hockey mask on, and I think this looks great. But what's unfortunate is that those long strands of hair that Jason has, those are awkwardly attached into the head, which results in this ugly seam. Fortunately enough, if you're using the hockey mask, the little bands that would hold the mask on Jason, if he were to be a real person, cover up those seam lines. So realistically speaking, I have a feeling that NECA knew about this in advance, and they just planned accordingly. And they didn't take care of the issue to begin with. Yeah. So throughout the rest of the figure, Jason does look like something that just emerged out of the swamp and is ready to kill basically anything that goes near Camp Crystal Lake. Honestly, whenever I look at this figure, I can just feel mold and swamp and mildew. His undershirt is looking very grimy with a bunch of holes, wrinkles, and a nice black wash that brings out those details and makes this look gross. The jacket that Jason is wearing honestly looks like it's pretty much bogged down and it is just soaking wet, which I think is a really cool effect that this Jason has. And of course, on his revealed skin, we are going to have a black wash to help bring out the details. His pants are all ripped up and they look pretty ferocious, revealing the skin underneath, which actually has a little bit of a black wash to it as well. Overall, this Jason's paint application is really, really good. The sculpt is fantastic, but the only drawbacks are going to be the hockey mask, which has too much peach revealed near the nose, and those seams for the hair. Jason's articulation is pretty much the same as all of the other Jason Voorhees figures, all the Ultimates anyway, that are on the market, so don't expect a whole lot of new stuff from him, but he does move around relatively well. What do we have? Well, we do have the heads, which plug in on a peg, and that peg sits in the neck on a ball joint, so we can get Jason to spin his head around, and with the default head sculpt, we're going to get a lot of range of movement. He can look up about that far, look down about that far, obviously spin his head around all the way, but we do have his luscious golden locks, which don't allow for that. For the bagged head sculpt, unfortunately, because of the way that it's sculpted, which you're going to see that in more detail here in a minute, We can't really rock his head around too much, but obviously, you know, it's going to restrict the movement a bit. So just using this sort of as the benchmark, we have nice fluid movement here, which is good. For the shoulders, we are going to have swivels and hinges, so this way we can spin his arms forward and around like that, and hinge to raise and lower the arm or move them in and out. This portion of his coat, which seems to be a separate part until you get all the way here to the back and realize, oh, hey, that's connected there. It will block movement from raising and lowering his arms, so just be mindful of that. We don't really have a true bicep swivel, but we do have one elbow hinge, which is a bit disappointing, and that hinge plugs into the bicep on a peg, so we can spin the arm around at the elbow, which is good. For the wrist joints, those of you who are familiar with the 2018 Michael Myers, this Jason is going to be using a similar style joint where we are going to have a hinge to move the hands as shown, which is good at the wrists, and then the hands plug in on that peg. So this way we get hinge and swivel movement, which is really nice. So as I'll make a comment later, if you do happen to have the 2018 Michael Myers, you might want to try experimenting with some hand swaps. Does not seem like we have any sort of ab crunch underneath this shirt, which is, there. But we do have a waist ball joint, which is great, so we can move Jason around in all sorts of different directions. For the legs, we are going to have hinges to move his legs out to the side like so, and we are going to have swivels, so this way we can move his legs forward and back. He's going to be able to move his legs forward about that far, and back about that far. Keep in mind here, we do have a sheath for the machete, which doesn't really work, I feel. So it is going to block the range of movement just because of the way the different strands are there, the braces, whatever that is, will block the movement because you don't want to rip them off. We do also have thigh swivels, which is good. Single hinge knees, which are starting to loosen up over time for me. Keep that in mind. Be careful there. And they do have swivels as well, so we can move Jason's legs around. And then we do have the ankles, which are blocked a little bit by the pants here, so do keep that in mind. What are we looking at here? Well, we do get a little bit of an ankle rocker movement, basically moving them forward and back. Not so much, even though there is a joint there apparently for that, so just keep that in mind. Overall, Jason is not really going to improve on previous Jason Voorhees figures, but to be honest, for how it does move by itself so far, it is good. I just wish NECA would update the articulation specifically for double jointed elbows because it's so much nicer. Time to talk accessories, and Jason's relatively light. Jason is going to come with an alternate head sculpt. He's going to come with an alternate right hand part to hold some of the weapons. He's going to be coming with the giant sword of a machete, the axe, the ice pick, the fire poker, and a screwdriver. So let's get into this, taking a look at the alternate head sculpt to begin with, and I do have to say this is first and foremost a fantastic throwback to the Part 2 Jason, where he is all bagged up and looking ferocious. I actually like this look a little bit more than the original one that we got, but that's what happens over time. Now, taking a look at the different weapons that Jason comes with, first he's going to come with that humongous machete, which is almost as big, the blade I'm talking about, as his torso. The detailing here is pretty sweet. It actually looks a little jagged on mine, though I don't think that that's intentional, and is more so from the molding process. Obviously, when Jason is holding this, he is going to look rather intimidating. He is also going to come with the axe, which the axe looks fine, but the actual handle for it is going to look pretty close to actual wood, which is great to see there. Now, of note, the alternate hand sculpt, I believe, is more so preferred to hold the axe because in the default hand, it's just going to kind of be loose, so if you use that alternate hand sculpt, he'll have a better grip. Then we're going to have the ice pick, the fire poker, and the screwdriver, and these are all fantastic extra accessories for this Jason to come with, though to be honest, I don't know how many folks are going to be using these because they're not necessarily as iconic as the former two weapons that Jason has. Now, all in all, if you're looking for a little bit of a mix-up here, if you happen to have the 2018 Michael Myers, you can actually swap the hands with him, and they might not match up with some of the rest of the skin on his body, but he does have more hand options, which is really what this figure needs because, once again, we have no extra hand parts to change up your display. So for an example, Jason can't hold any weapons in his left hand, only his right hand, and he doesn't have any splayed right hands in this release, which is a real shame here. They really should have done that. Also of note, in the promo pictures, Jason is supposed to sheathe the machete like a sword, because, I mean, it's as big as one, but I really found it difficult with the articulation and just the general location of everything for Jason, so this way he can actually make that pose without it being super awkward, so effectively, it really can't do that. All in all, a good package here for Jason. Just keep in mind, well, they could have done a little better. Now we're going to go ahead and move on over to a size comparison here with this huge Jason and the very small Sam figure, because I shot these reviews at the same time and I didn't really feel like doing two different size comparisons for them. So, hey, you get one extra figure in them. Overall, this Jason is rather large, just a little bit taller than your average Jason Voorhees figure to begin with. So if you're looking for an intimidating one, this is going to be one to consider. So buy now, skip, or wait for a deal. Jason looks great. The articulation is a little bit hindered, especially on the left leg. And the accessories, well, they get the job done, but I feel like NECA could have done a little bit more. That being said, I am, looking at this as it actually is. It is a pretty dang good figure, but to be honest, I really like this. With what we can get Jason in plenty of fun poses and make him look intimidating on the shelf. And of course, he can terrorize your other figures. That being said, NECA does have a few things ready to go, including alternate hand parts that they could even borrow from another character, and they didn't include it here, which is a bit of a drawback. Additionally, to really expand this display, you're probably going to want to pick up the Part 2 Jason, so this way you can get the Pamela head, and you can get the campfire, which I think are essential to this figure, because, it's kind of not a remake of Part 2. Anyway, this is a very nice figure that probably could be a little bit better, but for $28, gotta be honest with you, I am pretty dang content in saying it's worth the purchase. Well, collectors, that brings us to the end of the video today, and I just wanted to take a second to thank you so much for watching. Now you've heard a lot from me, I'd like to hear a little bit from you. Drop in the comments down below whether or not you liked it, you hated it, or maybe you were somewhere in between. I also want to take an extra second here for a nice, humongous thank you to all the patrons for STR over the last month who have really helped the channel grow into what it can be today. So to all of you, 2 big thumbs up. Thank you very much. And now the end card should be popping up, which will give you a few clickable links, like maybe to subscribe or head on over to my Patreon, or some short URLs like to my social media or to my Teespring store. There's also a video I hand selected for you, so if you want to watch another STR video, I hand selected some good content for you to watch, so definitely check out that video. Thank you again so much for watching, and I'll catch ya in the next video.